The Honourable Brian Walker.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. And once again, I'd like to voice the support of myself and our party for your elevation to the Governor-General, and thank you for all the work you've done in the past, and indeed for your successor. So I refer the Minister to Budget Paper number 2, Volume 2, about 414, about halfway down. That's headed Organised Crime Operations. Now, there's a very dramatic drop across the forward estimates in the funds allocated. It's probably an accounting thing rather than policing. But I'd like to drill down, if you would, into the actual funding allocation. Now, this might actually need to go on notice if Wapol is able to estimate the value, if you will, the value of the disruption being caused to organised crime, and in particular to the disruption being caused to the bikie gangs in financial terms throughout the community. So what I'm probably basically asking is, to put it another way, what street value, in particular of cannabis, has been seized by Wapol as part of its organised crime operations, as funded by the 8.6 million we see listed there? And what portion of that might be reasonably attributed to the bikie operations across the state?
Minister.
I'll ask the Commissioner to make a comment on that.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. In terms of the operations against serious and organised crime, it's fair for me to generalise that whenever there is an operation targeting serious and organised crime, certainly in Western Australia, outlaw motorcycle groups feature prominently. They are generally involved with broad drug trafficking, importation from international sources, and the transnational trafficking as was seen primarily from larger cities such as Sydney and Melbourne. There have been, as the member would be aware, some large interdictions for what we term motherships through maritime drug trafficking. Probably the most prominent was the apprehension of 3 people who were apprehended trying to actually attend to a yacht in the Abrolhos Island with another 2 international people. All those persons have now been convicted, and that was in the order of $1 billion of street value drugs. It's very difficult to actually proportionally say how deep is that market. We draw that down from a wastewater testing analysis to try and determine how much, for instance, methamphetamine is working its way through the wastewater systems. That does give us an approximation, but broadly speaking, across, for instance, the 2021 year, we seized tonnes of drugs, but importantly, we seized $83 million between July 2020 and June 2021, which was frozen and included cash. That very much puts a big dent into serious and organised crime networks because they all owe someone else. Often it will be from an international partner. That does very heavily disrupt. What I can advise the Council is that as a consequence of both large tonnage seizures and millions of dollars of cash, that has translated to between a 30 to 50% drop of burglaries in the state across the corresponding period, because persons who would otherwise try and procure particularly methamphetamine have not been offending as much because they simply can't purchase the drug as readily. We have seen some recalibration in more recent times with the borders becoming more porous, if I could put it that, but certainly it has made a significant impact on organised crime and crime more generally across the state.
Just if I can add to it, so it's probably important to note. So WA Police has or receives the funding, the annual funding, under a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding between the Attorney-General and the Minister for Police. So the MOU is a criminal property confiscation proceeds funding agreement for organised crime. And then as a result of the agreement, the approved funding of $17.658 million, inclusive of a bonus payment of $0.967 million from the previous MOU, and a carryover of $0.69 million is provided for from 2021 to 2023-24. Another once-off bonus payment applicable to 23-24 is to be determined by January 2023, subject to the performance of the WA Police Force in confiscating assets from organised crime operators in the first 18 months of the new agreement. So that's how it's funded.
The Honourable Brian Walker.
Deputy Chair, thank you. That may well answer my second question, because I was referring to budget in the same paper, page 424, the cost of services table, and the income headed grants and subsidies. And there was a substantial drop in the forward estimates, and to wonder how the service is expected to cope with a reduction from 8 million in actual in 2021-22 to forward predictions of 510,000 for the ensuing years from 2023 onwards. So my main interest was through any bonus payments and indeed proceeds of crime received by Wapol as a result of the proceeds of crime confiscation. And I'm relying here actually on the Auditor General's report number 5 on the confiscation of the proceeds of crime. And entitled to annual bonus payments for Wapol if it exceeds the quota of confiscations. So that being the case, can the Minister tell me what bonus payments, if any, were received across 2020 and 21, where I can see those reflected in the balance sheet? I'm guessing they're listed as income under this line income item, but I'd like some clarity around that. It may fall under other revenue, of course, in income from government further down the page. And what was the threshold for any bonus that to have been paid last year, please?
Okay,
Minister.
I'll park the bonus issue for a second. If I can ask Mr. Pasquale to comment on the first part of the question.
Yes, I can confirm that that particular line item you're talking about doesn't incorporate the proceeds of crime income, and mainly that line item represents not necessarily ongoing grant receipts. Grants are typically ad hoc, so in there is included a variety of grants which may include one-off Commonwealth funding, for example, so definitely not in that line item.
Thank you.
Was there further info?
I'll ask the Commissioner if he can make a comment in relation to the other part of the question.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Look, as a consequence of negotiations between myself, Deputy Commissioner Blanche, and the Director General of Justice, and directly with the Minister for Police and the Attorney General, we came to an agreement which extended the previous MOU, which was basically historically on a percentage basis, to provide for some one-off bonuses in 2021-22. That amounted to $4 million in excess of the percentage, and then a further one-off bonus of $3 million of 2022 to 2023. The premise behind that request, which I'm pleased that the Attorney General and the Minister for Police agreed to, was that those allocated funds were used and are being used through a tendering process to purchase specialised equipment, which greatly enhances our analytical and investigative capacity to further investigate and apprehend organised criminals. There is some payment that is being provisioned for some special operations and payment of overtime, but we're able to then recruit, for instance, subject matter experts such as solicitors, forensic accountants, which is really necessary. And what it will do, I'm extremely confident we will be able to actually recoup even more from organised crime, in which really they're funding the effort that we can actually then increase in seizing their assets. We are also, in addition, working with the CCC in terms of unexplained wealth and any capacity for us to further disrupt organised crime entities. And so it's pleasing that those one-off payments have been approved, and that will, I think, aggravate the organised criminal networks, because we'll be able to, in fact, do even more.